The part 1 of this tutorial series where we're going to build a 3D model of a light armoured vehicle. Now, the vehicle I've chosen is a German World War II light infantry vehicle known as the Sd.Kfz 222. So you can follow along and build this with me, or choose your own vehicle. The techniques and steps I'm going to go through are going to be very similar, and you could apply that to any 3D model really. Alright, so first off we want to learn as much as we can about the vehicle or the object that we're going to model. This will help build a more detailed model, and also when it comes to animating, give us a more realistic sense of weight if we know why things are where they are and how they move. Wikipedia is great for this. You can see here we can get the sort of dimensions and weight of the vehicle, as well as facts about what cannons it had and machine guns, as well as the difference between the different variants that came out. Some of the things I learnt about this vehicle were it has a rear-mounted engine, these cage things on top to stop grenades getting thrown in. It's also four-wheel drive and four-wheel steering, and you can see here the main cannon is actually fixed directly to the chassis, and as the cannon rotates, the turret is attached to the cannon. Google image search is great for getting reference material. You can either save these out, or what I like to do is create a little Pinterest board, and I'll save these out and I'll put a link to my board if you want to follow along. So another good thing to do is to add the word technical drawings. This will allow you to find some detailed orthographic views. Now these might become a little bit blurry in a 3D program, so the higher resolution you can find, the better. Another good resource is forums of collectors and restorers, and also model makers. You can see here this model kit shows pretty detailed information about different components and how they connect, as well as views that you might not easily be able to find on a photo, such as the sort of undercarriage of this vehicle. And this will be really handy when it comes to modelling all the little springs and hinges and how the wheels actually attach to the chassis, because it's a bit hard to see that on most photos. So I think this is a level of detail that we'll put into our model. We'll do the engine and the interior, mainly because in a top-down view you can see into this vehicle, and it's going to look a bit ordinary if we can't see inside. And we might even do a cross-section view to really show it off. This is the reference image that I think we'll use to build our image planes. This photo I came across just doing a Google search. This is a 1:6 scale physical model that a guy named John from East Coast Armory has made, and he's modeled this himself from scratch. Check out his Facebook page. He's put a step-by-step photo guide of his build process, and this will be really handy for us when we build our 3D model of this. So if you're building a different vehicle, try to find a similar resource. Not only has he got photos, he's also got a YouTube video where he does a tour of the finished model with a lot of close-up details, and this will just make our life a lot easier. Some of the components that are going to be tricky to model are the wheel assemblies, not the wheels themselves necessarily, but how the suspension connects to the chassis. There's quite a lot of detail. You can see here the machine gun and the main cannon, and this might look a little bit daunting, but it is all pretty straightforward, simple shapes, a bunch of cylinders and extrusions, and I don't think that'll be too hard. Alright, so jumping back into Photoshop, once we've got our orthographic image, we want to cut this up into the separate images. So to do that, we're going to use the crop tool, which is C, just up here, and then we just want to draw a marquee around the vehicle. We want to make this as tight as possible. You'll see later why. And you can also use the arrow keys just to nudge and move it around, and just hit enter when we're done, and save this out as the correct name, like front, left hand side, right hand side, etc. And then to revert back, just hit the open up in the history and do the same for the next images. If your images are already separate, just make sure that you have them as tightly cropped as possible. Alright, so now the fun part, jumping into Studio Max, we're going to first off create a project. So just under Manage, Set Project Folder, and if you haven't got one already, just create a folder for this project. It's always a good idea to do that. Okay, now the fun part. So first off, we're going to hit M to bring up the material editor, and clicking on our first material, just give this a name. We'll call it Ref for reference, and we'll call this one Front. And hit Enter, and then next to diffuse, click the little box, choose bitmap, and then select our image. Okay, so where's my front? That looks like the rear. There we go, front. Cool. So next we're going to create a image plane. So plane, our segments can just be set to 1, and I may as well go to the front camera, and I'll turn my snaps on, so S, and draw a image. Oh, sorry, a plane. And that's it. That's our first piece of 3D geometry. So next we want to click and drag to apply the material. And if we can't see it, we just need to choose this Show Shaded Material in Viewport button. And there's our front image plane. Now you'll notice if we were to scale this with the scale button, R, the image is constrained to the plane, so this will change our proportion, and it's the easiest way to set this correctly to start with is to look at the actual dimensions of the image itself. So dimensions, so you can see it's 199 by 205. So what I'll actually do is set the scale of my plane to those dimensions. So our length can be 205 and the height will be 199. And now I think that's the way around. I think it's 199 and 205. That looks more accurate. So now we've got that first image plane set up. We're going to duplicate this. So hit W for the move tool, hold shift and click and drag, and that'll create a new plane, and we want to choose copy. So now we want to put a new material on this. So if we click and drag from one material slot to the next, we can basically duplicate that material. We'll call this one rear, and under diffuse we'll change the file that references to the rear one, and then we just have to click and drag to apply it. So there we go, there's our front image plane, and if we just change from wireframe to default shading, there's our rear. So we just might want to push this one back. Let's turn the snapping off. There we go. So on our front camera we can see our reference image there, and if we were to switch to our rear camera or our back camera and change that to default shading, we can't see it because it's turned around. So spin that around, and you might want to do that with snapping turned on. There we go. So this is the sort of old-fashioned way to set up your image planes, which is fine, but there is a better way to do this. But I'll just finish this off. I'll just speed up the footage here so you don't have to sit through me explaining it. But basically the same steps to duplicate the planes, choose copy, and then change the material, call this one left hand side, we might just open the layers button now, select all our images and create a new layer and call it, say, reference for our reference images. And now if we lock this layer so we can't accidentally select them, you can see they're all grey. So we can fix this just by selecting them all, right clicking, going into object properties and unticking show frozen in grey. Now we can lock the entire layer and build without accidentally moving these planes. So what we might want to do is first of all move these so that the wheels are resting on the grid line or the origin, and then in the front camera selecting the image and making sure it's directly in the center. So the easiest way to do this, let's make this full screen, I found is to bring up the material editor and then change the objects. If we go up to parent, we're going to change the opacity. No, it's not the opacity. It is opacity here. I'm going to change this one. And just make sure I'm on the right material. So, oops. There we go. So if we bring that opacity down, we can see the grid, and we might just line that up and then set the wheels. So that's pretty good. Alright, so here's the finished scene set up, ready to start building. This is, I guess, more the traditional way of using actual images as the planes, and when we're on the corresponding camera, you can see it's sort of like the background behind the grid, and we can build our geometry right in front of it and use it as a guide. The only downside with this is it is a bit fiddly setting up all 4 images, or 5, or even 6 if you had all 6 sides, and they can tend to get in the way. They are showing up on orthographic cameras, so you can push them as far back into the background as you like to get them out of your way when you're working in perspective. But a better way to do it is what I'm going to show you now. So if we just clear the scene, what we're going to do is create a box, and turning snap on with S, we're going to click and drag in the perspective camera from the left to the right, keeping it equal on the origin, which I didn't do. So we'll just fix that by deleting it and doing it again. There we go. Still not right. 2 by 2. There we go. So we've got this image over here, which I found online, which shows us the dimensions. Let's bring it over. Here we go. So you can see it's 480 centimeters long, 195 wide, and 175 high. So what we're going to do is work in millimeters. So we can set that by under customized unit setup and making sure we're set to millimeters. And we're going to enter in those dimensions into our cube. Bring up the material editor. I've already set up my materials here, and I'm going to drag on the front, and you can see we've got the front texture showing up on all 6 sides of our cube, and the front one looks pretty good. So how do we get a different material on the other sides? What we do is convert this to an editable poly, and then choosing faces, we're going to select the side and choose our side texture and click and drag it on. So there's our left. Choose this other side and apply our right texture, which I don't have, so I'll just click and drag this onto a new spot here, and I'll change it to right hand side and choose the right hand side image. Left hand side, cool. So there's the left, there's the right, same for the top and the rear. So you can see the top is rotated. So to fix that, we're going to select it and choose our top texture. Clicking on the texture itself, we're going to rotate it using this value here. So if we type in 90, there we go, let's fix it up. But it looks like the car is facing the wrong way, so we'll add 180 plus 90 is 270, and that spins it around the correct way. Now I also found an image for the bottom. It's actually a photo of a model, so it has a bit of perspective on it, but I still think it's worth putting in there because it'll be handy when we're building the undercarriage. So what we'll do is we'll drag our material onto a new slot, and we'll call this base, and for our diffuse, and you can see we've got the same problem here as the top image had, so we'll just rotate that by 90, and you can see we've got this spare wheel on the side, which isn't quite right. That should be up here, so we'll spin that around 270 as well. So there we go, we've got all 6 sides. Oops, and I seem to have moved it, so just undo. Just make sure you don't do anything like that. Alright, so now we've got our cube set up. You can kind of get an idea for how big our vehicle is going to be. If I just pop to the left camera, one thing I'll just check is it looks like this is squashed a little bit, and that'll be due to using a different set of dimensions from this reference image compared to ours. So, and these are both just illustrations, they're not photo reference, so I guess it's open to interpretation. But what I will do is create a cylinder, and with snapping off, I'll just choose the center of that wheel, and holding Shift and Alt, I'll click and drag out to drag it out from the center. Oops. Once I let go of the mouse, I'll just move up and click. That's just setting the depth. So I'm going to use this as a guide, and then I can just one click to select the cube. I'm going to rotate it just up in Z, and I'm just going to toggle between F3. One thing I could do is choose my side material and just turn its opacity down. I'm pretty happy with that. So the good thing about using a cube rather than image planes is you don't have to make sure you have all 4 of them selected if you change the scale like I just did. You've just got one object, and that's going to keep the images all together. So you can see why in Photoshop we wanted to crop these images down as tight as possible to the cube. If we did have a problem where the image wasn't quite centered, we could move the cube, but that might ruin the placement on one of our other views. We could use these U and V values here, just to get that perfectly centered. So we can just turn the opacity down if we want to see the grid coming through, and we'll have to do that to the rear as well. Sorry, to the base texture as well. Alright, so our top texture, I'm just going to nudge that across. That's looking pretty good. Check out our front. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Again, I might just be a little bit fiddly now because it'll make our life easier later on. Alright, that's looking pretty good to me. One thing I might just double check is that the left and right are in line with each other. I'm just going to move the whole cube. So that, what I'm trying to do is line up this edge here with the edge of that face of the cube. So that looks pretty good on the left view, and I'll just change to the right. And it looks pretty good there too. So that's good. So I'm pretty happy with that. Now, we could model inside this cube, but it's going to be quite difficult to see what's going on. So what I'll quickly do is just reset all these values back to 100% opacity. Okay, so what we're going to do, which might seem a bit confusing, but we're going to turn this cube inside out. What I mean by that is if I was to select, say, one of the faces of this cube and delete it, you can see inside the cube is just black, and we can't see the other sides of these faces. So what we're going to do is select all the faces and choose flip, and now you can see our cube is basically inside out. And then we're going to right click and object properties, turn off backface color. So what that's doing is, it's normally when you have a cube you can only see three faces of it, and what backface culling is doing is it's not rendering the side behind the camera can't see. If we hit F3 for example, you can see the edges of this cube, but the one on our left here that we've turned off backface culling, we can't see the other two faces. So show you again, right click, backface cull, tick. There you go, we can't see the two sides behind. And the reason ours looks inside out is because we flipped it. So now we've got a workspace to work within, and as we rotate the camera it's going to basically cull out the face that would normally be in our way. So now we can start modeling inside here, and as we turn the camera around we don't have anything in our way. One thing we do have to check though is if I just delete these pieces, is when we're on our front camera we're actually looking at the rear, and when we're on our what would be our left camera, this is actually the right hand side. So what's happening is the camera is looking through and it's drawing the wrong image. So easy way to fix this is just to put the opposite images on our cube. So we'll just select our cube, go back to our face mode, and the front is normally there. So I might just select all the faces and choose flip and paint the opposite. So our rear is switched with our front. Our left hand side, our right hand side with the wheel, it's going to be the right hand side. The right hand side is going to be the left. Top's going to be the base, and the base is going to be the top. And let's complete that cube. So now we can select everything and choose flip. And now when we go to our front camera, we've got the front of the car, our left shows the left, and our right shows the right, our top shows the top, and our bottom shows the bottom. So this is now ready to go. Well, one thing you can see that is incorrect is our car is facing the wrong way. So this is the front of the car and this is our front camera, so we really want to choose our flip these images around. So I'll just show you how to do that now. So again, we'll just select everything, choose flip, and then on our sides just choose the texture and we'll choose mirror on, oops, just make sure you've got the right texture selected. So we didn't actually have to flip our cube back, we just need to flip the material swatch here. So our left hand side, diffuse, choose mirror, and tile. Sorry, that's not what we want to change. We want to change our tiling to be -1, and we'll change that one. There we go. And we'll do the same for our other side. Tiling -1. Alright, now we go left. There we go. Perfect. So one last thing we might do just to finish this up is, you can see in a perspective camera our origin, our little grid is tiny. So we might just increase that to match the scale of our vehicle. So that's just under edit, where is that? Tools, grids and snappings. And if we choose home grid, we can choose, which I think it's under options. I can never remember which one it is. Percentage. Here we go. Perspective view grid extent. So we might just scale that up, something like that. And we'll just set the major grid lines every 10 units. They're a little bit hard to see on the grey background. And our grid spacing every 10 millimeters. So I think we'll leave it as that, because that's every 10 centimeters we'll have a major grid line, and then 10 major grid lines will be a meter. Alright. And that's how we set up. So you can use this technique to set up any scene. And one final thing we'll do is just make sure show frozen in grey is unticked, and we'll put this into its own reference layer and freeze it so we don't accidentally select it. And we're good to go. Alright, thanks for that guys. I hope you found it helpful. If you did, please give the video a like. Here's a sneak peek of what we'll be working on next week. I plan to bring out a video each week with each step, so please subscribe if you're interested in following along, and we'll continue this in the next video.